Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and with me today is Peter Lavelle, co-founder of The Gaggle and host of RT's talk show Crosstalk. So there was a lot of excitement earlier this week when it appeared as if the US Supreme Court was about to enter into the election fray. A couple of weeks ago, a Pennsylvania state judge had ruled, unusually ruled in favor of the Pennsylvania GOP, which was actually contesting the law in Pennsylvania that had been changed in October 2019. Mark the date, October 2019, so long before COVID. This law massively expanded absentee ballots. And the point of the suit was to say that any change in election law in Pennsylvania would be a violation of the Constitution because essentially you would need a constitutional amendment to do so. No such constitutional amendment was undertaken. And so therefore this vote, which involved a massive expansion of the mail-in ballots, was basically invalid. So the Pennsylvania Commonwealth judge said, yeah, you're likely to prevail on the merits of the case. And so she granted the Pennsylvania GOP essentially an injunctive relief. In other words, what they were seeking was to prevent the certification of the vote. So she said, yeah, I think we should prevent the certification of the vote because it's quite possible that you will succeed on the merits of the case. Within 24 hours, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court stepped in and overturned the ruling of this judge. This was appealed to the US Supreme Court, and there was a lot of excitement because Justice Samuel Alito had originally set a date of December the 9th for briefings, and then he suddenly said, no, let's do it on December the 8th. And December the 8th is, of course, a safe harbor day, so it looked as if, wow, Alito's really means some business here. So that was one case that was heading to the Supreme Court. The other one, which was a very dramatic midnight jump, there's the state of Texas has sued Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania by saying that essentially that these changes in the electoral laws in these states had violated the state constitution because any changes in electoral law have to be implemented by the state legislatures. So these were, in fact, state officials or state courts doing this, and therefore this is a violation of state constitutions and a violation very explicitly of the federal constitution, which says electors have to be selected by state legislatures, and therefore it's the state legislatures that decide the method by which the electors are going to be selected. So this goes straight to the Supreme Court because any contest between states, only the Supreme Court can adjudicate it. And now several other states have joined Texas: Missouri, Florida, Arkansas, Louisiana. And so that's pending. They've been told briefings are supposed to be held by sometime on Thursday. Well, while all this excitement was taking place, the US Supreme Court, 10 minutes after the briefings on the Pennsylvania case, the first case, 10 minutes later, they issued a one-sentence rejection of the demand for injunctive relief. No explanation was offered, no dissents were presented, they just simply flat out rejected it. So that's it. Now, the petitioners, the Pennsylvania GOP, say that they're going to file something called the writ of certiorari, but no one has any real hopes for that, because if you don't get the injunctive relief, that means essentially the court is saying that you're not really going to prevail on the merits. And so, they may well file this certiorari, but it's unlikely that they will, that the result will be any different from what happened then. So now there's only this one, the Texas case pending. Now I happen to think that the outcome of the Texas case will be very much the same as the outcome of the Pennsylvania case, because the US Supreme Court is as cowardly as any other institution, and it doesn't want to get involved.
Doesn't want to get involved.
So
that's just it. It doesn't want to get involved, number one. And the way they look at this, and I think probably the majority of the justices believe that there's been malfeasance here, but that's something the states have to worry about and work out. And we don't want to get involved in your squabbles there. I don't know. I'm not convinced that's the right move. Another thing is that I'm really disturbed with where they just give this one line with no dissent. I mean, that is so open to interpretation. What does that mean?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm very, very disturbed by that. You know as well as I do how hard it is to bring a case to the Supreme Court. I mean, under normal times, it's something like 800 cases are directed to the Supreme Court a year, and they essentially deal with 80. Okay.
I think it's more like 8,000 and to 80.
Okay.
It's even worse.
You're right. I get it. It's
essentially 1%.
1%. Thank you. And so, why? Because the Supreme Court is supreme. That's why we call it that. Okay. And to have something like this go all the way to the Supreme Court, and then they don't have anything to say, then why did you listen to it? Okay. We need that. Also, I think that, one of the problems in dealing with this very screwed up election is that what is the remedy? See, this is what I think a lot of these judges grapple with. What is the remedy? Because the way we look at it is that all legal votes have to be counted. But see, the other side says, no, we just need to recount the votes. Well, you're recounting illegal votes, okay? You're just recycling it over and over and over again because you're going to get the same number. Right. But there's no remedy there.
Well, I think that there is a remedy there. And the remedy was made quite specific, which is if you say that this was unconstitutional or that there were illegal votes, then essentially the Supreme Court can have this very simple remedy. We're going to throw it to the state legislatures because they are the ones tasked by the Constitution to select the electors. And then the state legislatures can take into account the election results or not. It will be up to them because clearly the election results were bogus. So therefore, they will have other stat criteria to decide about the electors, because that's the one thing. I mean, it's not always been the case. It's not always been the case that the only way you select the electors is via an election. It's still up to the state legislature to select the electors.
But what that does also, I mean, I agree with your remedy there, but the result, or one of the consequences of that result would be a lot of other people would say, well, what about my vote? I voted for Biden. Am I being disenfranchised? You see how this turns into two mirrors reflecting into each other into infinity. And I think you used the word cowardice, maybe that's a bit strong, but this is too important for the court to say, we'll push it back to you guys, okay?
There's a reason why I said cowardice, because now the Supreme Court is under the gun. Normally the Supreme Court, they have jobs for life, that's it. They don't have to worry about anything. Suddenly they're under the gun because they may well be thinking, well, the Democrats could well take both of those Senate seats in Georgia. They have a majority in the Senate, they have the presidency of the House, they can push through the packing of the court. And that's what I think they are worried about, that instead of 9 justices, they can suddenly have 15, 21 justices. So I think now suddenly they are under the gun and they are frightened of what might be coming. So normally I would say, no, what do they have to be scared of? I think now they do have something to be scared of. So I think.
Well, I mean, they have jobs for life. Okay, so
they don't want to be in 21. They don't want to be suddenly find a whole bunch of political hacks sitting there. The cases.
But I'm sure every single one of them, if they have any belief in the Constitution at all, it is not defined. obviously for the conservatives, well, traditionally this is what we have done and it's worked more or less, okay? One of the thoughts that keeps going through my mind, George, and I don't want to get too meta here, but I think of that decade before the American Civil War, where there was that lack of political strength to resolve this oncoming storm, and everybody knew it. It's not like it was a surprise to anyone, okay? And no one could have predicted how destructive. I mean, the American Civil War was one of the, it's really one of the first modern destructive wars where you had huge casualties on the battlefield. And it was because the institutions were weak and people they just want to kick the can down the line. And my belief, my faith in the Supreme Court is diminishing right now, because this is what we need you for. You're not there to be popular. You're not there to be popular at all. And I think that the GOP has been pretty adroit in pointing out that, prior to in one case it was a year before, but in weeks and months before the election, there was this really rapid fire changing of the election laws here. And it seems to me, from a judicial point of view, the intent was to disenfranchise, okay? That's something that is very, very damaging here.
That's right.
And I just don't think the Supreme Court should take this so lightly. I mean, if you're going to say we're not going to hear the case, tell me why. I mean, give me your judicial wisdom why you don't want to do this, because that will be a huge question mark left open for all of time.
And that's what happens. Exactly. That's what happens when you get cowardice, because they're not really even thinking of that. I mean, they basically have two options. They can either get involved, and then they have the fury and hatred and rage of all of the Democrats, much of the media, that would be directed against them. It happened after Bush v. Gore, but they survived that because they weren't then under threat. This time, they have all this rage that will be directed against them, plus they're under threat. Now, of course, if the Republicans prevail in Georgia, the threat disappears, but they don't know that. So they're looking at it and thinking, well, hey, the Democrats may well have the Senate, and we will be facing court packing.
Well, I mean, it doesn't take a high IQ to ask the following question. Is the election going to be played out in Georgia the same way it was played out nationwide? Really? I mean, that should send a chill down your back.
Well, exactly. And that's exactly what they're thinking.
The same thing again?
Because they can see, they read the stuff, they read the papers, they look at the internet, they've seen this massive lawsuit that has been filed in Georgia state court, listing the number of phony votes that were cast in the election. In other words, people have gone through it and have actually listed the thousands upon thousands of votes that should not have been cast. They had felons, people underage, people living there illegally in the United States, people who were basically not residents of Georgia, so on. Thousands, way past the margin of Biden's victory.
And George,
so therefore they know this is going on. So if this is going on now, it's the result in January in the Senate runoffs will be identical. So that's what they are thinking. Yeah, look, the Republicans are probably going to lose. I mean, the Democrats have basically they fixed this election. They've been working on this for a long time, and they've got the election, in their hands.
Jonathan Turley, he's a legal advisor and contributor at Fox. He said that the Trump administration the runway is coming to an end, and it's like landing a jumbo jet on a postage stamp. I'm a big admirer of Jonathan Turley because he does push against the liberal tilt. But I'm not sure I particularly agree with him here. I mean, the most important date is Inauguration Day. That's the most important date. So people always we're running out of time here. No, I mean, the Constitution is really hard and fast. That's the day it happens. All this other stuff, well, it's because it's about the states, okay? And and we shouldn't overly concern ourselves with that. Okay, what is important, there's plenty of time, and this is where I disagree with so many of the naysayers. What's your rush? What's your rush? Okay, let's go through the entire thing all over again from the very beginning. Let's look at all of the timelines. Okay, let's we have time to compare signatures. If it's off, throw it out. Okay, all right. I mean, and that way, and have, put, you remember Gore versus Bush. I mean, and what was it, in Dade County? I mean, they had the cameras in there, and they were watching everybody, and they were showing the ballots, and then Republican, Democrat, both sides. Why can't we do that?
Well,
exactly. Why can't we do that?
The point is that you have January, I think the 5th, when the House of Representatives meets to certify the College of Electors. But even that date isn't hard and fast. That
no, it's not.
Be delayed by
tradition.
2 weeks, tradition. Right up to January the 20th. They basically they can meet on January the 19th to certify the College of Electors. So there is plenty of time, but you have essentially very cowardly people on the courts who are, I mean, they're physically afraid. I mean, there's no question. I mean, some of these judges are physically afraid. I mean,
a lot of these judges are elected too. They have the
they're elected. But essentially, I mean, look, I mean, we've seen what happens on Twitter. I mean, people's home addresses are published on Twitter or Facebook. It only has to get, imagine, some of these Supreme Court justices, they publish Alito's address on Twitter. Boom. Even if Twitter takes it down within 10 minutes, people will have noticed it, will have immediately been passing it around to everybody. And suddenly he's got a huge mob outside his home. And same with the other justices. So I think they are genuinely afraid, more so than they were in 2000.
Oh yeah,
this time there's real threat of violence that there wasn't then.
What really, this is really turning into a car wreck. I think obviously the writing is on the wall. If the Supreme Court isn't going to intervene and make some kind of ruling, God, it's so frustrating. Right. That's really frustrating. Then we know the writing is on the wall here. And that's why the Trump orbit has to keep fighting to the very, very last day. And if they're fighting to the very last day before the inauguration, there's no reason for Trump to show up, okay, at all right? Because this is a travesty. This is absolute travesty. Right. And what it has done, what you just said about this doxing and stuff like that, it didn't happen in 2000 because there was not that level of intimidation. Right. I mean, now it's everywhere in social media, everywhere in the media. It's all intimidation. You can't run a quote unquote civil society with this level of intimidation. You're going to have this kind of monastic sense of living. People are going to start closing it off. They're going to start putting the walls around them. And like the Oscars and the NFL and the basketball, when all these other kind of stupid awards and stuff like that, people are tuning out. They're tuning out on a massive scale. And you can't run a coherent, cohesive, unified society that way. We've lost, I think it's RIP. We have lost this sense of peaceful transition of power. We've lost it.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think you're right that what Trump is doing is essentially creating a record. And that's not insignificant. You create a record. I mean, like this lawsuit in Georgia probably won't go very far. It's about 1,500 pages. So a list of all of the illegal votes. Probably it'll be thrown out, but it's a record. It's going to be on the internet. People can look at it and say, this election in Georgia was stolen. Everything in Pennsylvania. There's a record now of a lawsuit. A very compelling case was made that this was an unconstitutional change in the law. The Supreme Court just simply threw it out without providing any explanation as to why is this an invalid claim. So you create a record. And so when Trump does come back, you say, look, I didn't have my day in court. No, people will say, oh, well, you had your day in court. No, I didn't have my day in court. The judges refused to listen. We presented, very strong affidavits. We presented very strong petitions. We had great lawyers preparing these documents, and the judges simply threw it out without bothering to look at the details and came up with some ridiculously legalistic argument for rejection. That's going to be a strong case. So I think you're right. I mean, I think he's looking for 2024 rather than relief for this election.
Yeah, but the damage, with the damage that in the waning days of the Obama administration with the DOJ and the FBI did, then we went through all this Russiagate hoax, and we went through Ukraine hoax, we went through impeachment hoax, and now this is the cherry on the top. I mean, you don't need very much more to discourage people, and people are going to start digging in their heels here, and I think that it's the way people will look at politics now is that they just don't have any kind of role in the official realm here, and that's why I think people again are going to be kind of moving inward internally, and they're going to be looking at their communities more, because on a national scale it's all chaos, and they're the target. The Biden says he wants to unite, he wants to bring people together, and he wants to invite you to the table. No, we're on the menu. Okay, we don't have a seat. We're on the menu.
Right. No, that's right. And it would be interesting if, as seems likely, the Supreme Court will reject Texas's suit. Whether the Supreme Court will come up with some reason, some explanation as to the basis on which they're rejecting the case. Because if they do this full another stunt like this, like the one sentence rejection, then I think the Supreme Court's in a lot of trouble. Because now you're insulting the state, you're insulting Texas, you're insulting Florida, you're insulting, and just because you're too cowardly to take this case on. So they're in a bit of a bind now. I mean, one thing to insult the Pennsylvania GOP, another thing to insult Texas.
Yeah, but this is what the Supreme Court is supposed to do. It's supposed to be the court of last resort. They're the ones that the guys and gals in the big pants, they're the ones that, when we're all squabbling among ourselves, they rise to the occasion and they give us a ruling and they explain themselves to us here, even if we don't like their decision. At least they gave us the time of day. Okay. And if that's not going to happen, whoa, they're going to rue the day, because you and I were brought up to revere the Supreme Court. I mean, seriously, and now it's so cheapened. The hearings for the nominees, and now all of this. I mean, it's not so supreme anymore if they can't explain to us in simple language to the average voter what the hell happened.
Right. No, I that's right, because you can't get a more fundamental question than who won the election. Was the election conducted in accordance with the law? Was it conducted in accordance with state constitution, with the federal constitution? You can't get a more fundamental Supreme Court question than that. And if they punt on this, then really people are going to say, why are we listening to the Supreme Court anyway? How do we care what they say about transgender identities and gay marriage and all the other issues that they wade into? If you can't address this fundamental question, then go to hell. Do something else with your time. Write scholarly articles, but don't waste our time.
We all kind of half jokingly and through exhaustion talk about good riddance 2020. Well, I don't think 2021 is going to be much different, George. Okay, because the seeds of disaster they've been planted and now they're beginning to sprout. And this is going to end up in a bad place. I just know it, in a bad place here. Because if you void half the population in a country that, at least nominally speaking, prides itself on the First Amendment, the right to assembly, the right to vote. I mean, all of these pillars here, they're all being knocked down one right after another like dominoes here. I mean, what's there to believe in? Okay, certainly not institutions. And these institutions are doing it to themselves. This is self-inflicted wounds.
No, I think that's right. I mean, the right to vote, the right to assembly, the right to speech, right to religious practice, and the right to seek legal remedy in the courts. fundamental. I mean, you have a number of amendments that specifically address your right to legal remedy, and that is being denied. Anyway, we will maintain our customary laser-like focus. There'll be big developments later this week at the Supreme Court, and we will be there to address it. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.